Hi, I'm John Mayfield, the Real Estate Tech Guy, with another Global Real Estate School podcast. Hey, welcome to the podcast. John Mayfield, the Real Estate Tech Guy. We are running just a few minutes late, and hope I wasn't live just a couple of minutes ago. I thought I was live and then realized I forgot to put a title in the description and a title to go live, so I quickly did that and then hit the live button, and I'm thinking, I hope all of that wasn't like being broadcast live. But Friday night, 7 o'clock, yes, a couple of times I may be recording my podcast videos during the day and then pushing them out at 7 p.m. But tonight, it's live, baby. I mean, I'm live, so we're going live, and it's November the 15th, and it's the weekend's here, so hopefully you're excited about that. But I want to help you with some real estate examination questions. So I've got some flashcards, digital flashcards I thought we would go over around the content that we kind of have been covering this week on fair housing. I know we took a little detour and went over the math problem, and I did something else that were previously recorded. Then last night we had a career night. But tonight we're picking back up on this whole section in the PSI Candidate Handbook on fair housing, ADA, some of those items. So let's jump over to the board. I think it's right here. And I want to remind you that if you would like to download some of my free recently seen exam questions, you can go to helpmepasstherealestateexam.com and you can download those questions for absolutely free. So, well, I wanted to actually put my photo up there in the side so that I could kind of talk to you from time to time, but I'll come back and visit with you here and as we go through the definitions. So these are just some flashcards. I should have put a little transition where they go flip over like a flashcard. But when you think of the Americans with Disabilities Act, what do you need to think of? Well, ADA, the American Disabilities Act, is a civil rights law prohibiting discrimination based on disability. And there's the key, public, right up there, public. I'll highlight that if we can quickly here, but public accommodations. So I'm going to actually have to go back here. So I would highlight the word public there and understand that, this helps everyone who have disabilities to have equal opportunities in public accommodations. Now, I go to a lot of other countries and have been very blessed to be able to speak in a lot of other countries. And I have to tell you, many countries I go to do not have ADA laws. And oftentimes I'll be thinking, how could someone with a wheelchair get into this building, or someone with some type of disability? We're very fortunate that we have made provisions to ensure that people with disabilities have equal opportunities to be able to get into buildings and elevators, and opportunities for hotels and apartment buildings where they can be able to live, especially newer properties, in properties that will accommodate them. Now, notice the last paragraph. The ADA ensures equal access for individuals with disabilities in public spaces covering areas such as commercial real estate and certain public areas within residential buildings. I would definitely make a note of this, that we're talking about commercial properties. However, if you were to build an apartment complex or some other types of residential developments where there is a public gathering areas, we talked about that, such as a rec room or a pool area, though, and it's a newer development, those would need to conform to ADA laws. But generally, we're talking about commercial properties, okay? Just understand there are some residential facilities and specific places within that residential facility that's open to everyone from the public within that, in that development, that needs to be ADA compliant. So again, you have a residential development, but there is a clubhouse that they build. You're going to need to build the clubhouse, since that's for everyone in the public of that subdivision to be ADA compliant. Other than that, we're really looking at commercial properties, okay? So let's talk about this public accommodations. I think that's important there. These are facilities open to the public that must be accessible to people with disabilities under ADA rules. Now remember, properties that were built after 1992 need to comply with the ADA rules. If it's before that time frame and it's something that can be easily fixed or taken care of, then the ADA needs to be complied with. Okay, they're not going to make you go out and do anything that's going to be very cost prohibitive. But if it's something easy, like some grab bars in the restroom, or a small ramp over one or two stairs, that may need to be taken care of by that public facility. So some examples would include retail stores, real estate offices, leasing offices with residential complexes. Private residential spaces are generally exempt unless, and I would write that down, they contain public facilities. So again, we're not talking about residential properties when we talk about ADA. It's very specific that it's commercial properties unless that residential facility has a public area, lobby or whatever, that would need to comply with ADA. So don't forget that. Okay, reasonable accommodation. We talked about this: adjustment in rules, policies, or practices to allow equal access for individuals with disabilities. This might include allowing a service animal in a no-pet building. That would be what we would call a reasonable accommodation. Accommodations, and I think this is important, relates to policy changes rather than structural modifications. So if you see exam questions and they're asking about some type of a structural modification, that's not a reasonable accommodation. That's a modification to the property. But a reasonable accommodation might be, hey, I know this is a no-pet apartment building, but if you need a service animal to perform certain tasks for you, that would be allowable. Now, we did talk about, and I'm going to double check right now while we're on the broadcast, what qualifies for a service animal under fair housing and ADA. And the other day I mentioned to you that these service animals or assistance animals are protected. Now, it mentions here the other day is that, and I talked about this the other day about being dogs, but it said type of dog or type of animal, service dogs, miniature horses are permittable. So I need to go fix that. Service animals, assistant emotional support animals, training required, yes, for task-specific support. No training required for emotional support animals. That's under FHA. Under ADA, public spaces. Under FHA, residential properties. And examples would be guide dog for blindness, alert dog for seizures. So I think miniature horses do qualify as I read this here. So I need to fix that in a previous video, so I'm glad I pulled that up. So could be a miniature horse, could be a service dog. This gets a little bit crazy when you start. I say crazy as far as a little bit complicated is the word I meant to use when you're trying to remember, does a service dog count or an emotional pet? Some of those you got to be careful and understand which ones are which. So anyway, my apologies there. Remember, a dog or a miniature horse fall underneath that according to what I just looked up. Reasonable modification. A reasonable modification is, again, what it says. It's something that is reasonable. Grab bars in a bathroom. Maybe lowering some cabinets. That might fall underneath that. It could be a ramp. I don't know if lowering the cabinets would fall under that, but probably on the exam, they're going to just focus on installing grab bars in bathrooms, adding a ramp. Those would be reasonable modifications. Undue burden, that's a significant difficulty or expense that exempts property owners from making certain ADA modifications. If an accessibility modification is too costly or structurally challenging, property owners may not be required to make the change under the ADA guidelines. To me, I'm thinking lowering cabinets would be kind of costly, but grab bars, a small ramp outside, those types of ADA modifications, I think are good examples of what we, would not be an undue burden. But you could see a question, and if you read that and say, gosh, that just seems like a huge burden for the property owner, that, as you can see here, that expense you wouldn't have to do. So keep that in mind. Excuse me. FHA, the Fair Housing Act, that is, the Fair Housing Act is a law that prohibits housing discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and familial status. Those are the protected classes. Let's see if I can write here with my pen. So these right here, I'm using my mouse, okay? Those are what we call the protected classes. So do not forget that. Make sure that you understand those, and that will be very important for you to do. All right. Now I need to get my pen off. Let's see if we can go back to take that off, and let's see. Last paragraph, the FHA applies to residential properties and aims to prevent discrimination in housing opportunities. It overlaps with ADA. There's that word again, when public spaces are part of a housing complex. So, know the protected classes, connect the dots, ADA, public spaces. You'll be able to pick out those questions very easily and remind yourself of these items that are reasonable accommodations, allowing for a service animal when you might not necessarily allow pets. It's important to remember there's a distinction between a service animal and a emotional support animal. You don't necessarily have to make the accommodation, the reasonable accommodation for a support animal, but you do for a service animal. Now, remember, a service animal is trained to do tasks for the disabled individual. And I made a mistake on a previous video that I'll try to get out there and fix. So service animals could be dogs that are trained to perform tasks for someone with a disability, or a miniature horse falls under that as well. Now, familial status, take a look at this one here, is a protected class under the Fair Housing Act that includes families with children under the age of 18, as well as pregnant individuals and those obtaining custody of children. You could have 3 very specific questions here, testing your knowledge of what falls under familial status. So it's families with children under 18, a pregnant individual, or those who are obtaining custody of children. They are protected under familial status under the Fair Housing Act. Discriminating against families with children is a violation of the FHA. Terms like no kids in ads would be seen as targeting familial status, which is prohibited. The protected classes, we just went over that a minute ago. They're listed there. You need to know those. They will help you answer questions on the test. So know the protected classes, okay? And those are race. Remember, under the Civil Rights Act of 1866, you can never, ever discriminate against race. Color of your skin, your religion, cannot discriminate against that. National origin, sex, disability, and familial status. You've got to know these protected classes. It's so important. Fair housing law mandates that ads cannot express, we're talking about advertisements, preferences or exclusions based on these characteristics. And the key word in that last paragraph I would write down is advertisements, okay? Service animal, we talked about this earlier, a dog trained to perform specific tasks for an individual with a disability recognized under ADA. Now, again, key there is it's trained to do what? Perform specific task for an individual with a disability recognized under ADA. Now, I'm going to go back out because I'm really concerned here. I'm on ChatGPT, a miniature horse trained to perform task for a disabled person under the FHA is permitted to live in an apartment. In other words, I'm going to ask ChatGPT, is allowing a miniature horse a reasonable accommodation? Let's see what ChatGPT says. And it says, yes, it is. A miniature horse that is trained to perform tasks for a person with a disability can be considered a reasonable accommodation. Now, 24 to 34 inches in height, 70 to 100 pounds, making them permissible to live indoors. Service animals are permitted in public spaces under ADA rules, unlike emotional support animals, which are protected only in housing under fair housing. Fair housing advertising rules. Guidelines to prevent discriminatory language in housing advertisements based on protected classes. You cannot use discriminatory language in any of those protected classes in your ads. Remember, we talked about this. Your ads must be inclusive and focus on the property rather than on the desired tenant or buyer's characteristics. Okay? Very important there. And there's violations. So don't forget our free real estate exam questions, recently seen, by the way. I say recently seen topics, conversations on certain ones, and you can just go to helpmepasstherealestateexam.com and you can download those free questions. So I'm still a little concerned because we were talking about I'm going to just ask the question here, do I have to rent to someone who has an emotional support animal? I said you had to with a service animal. Remember, there's a difference there. Service animals trained to perform tasks for someone with a disability. Emotional support is exactly what it says. I don't see it popped up there. It says, yes, under the Fair Housing Act, landlords and housing providers are generally required to make reasonable accommodations for tenants with emotional support animals, ESAs, even if the property has a no pets policy. However, there are specific rules and exceptions to keep in mind. Well, you know what? That's going to be our next broadcast, because I'm going to figure that out and make sure I'm giving you the right information for your test, okay? It gets a little complicated, and I'm teaching this for a long time, but when you get into all of the ADA and the service animals and the emotional support animals, I want to make sure we get this correct. So we'll do that on the next broadcast, but don't forget to go out and download the free recently seen exam questions at Help Me Pass the Real Estate Exam. I see a couple of people out there. If you have any questions, I'm going to pop up the chat box because I can answer your questions. So feel free to write me if you have a question, but I'm going to really dig into that emotional support and the service so we can find out how's it work. I'm getting that response from ChatGPT, but AI is not always right. So we want to make sure we know this for the exam. However, I don't think they're going to get real detailed in the weeds on some of those questions. I really believe what we've covered so far will give you the necessary information to answer any of those questions, but we're going to find out for sure. Hey, don't forget, check us out at globalrealestateschool.com. We've got some great digital flashcards there. I have practice exams, so much more. I want to help you pass the exam, and we're going to keep going through the outline and live streaming every night, weeknights at 7 o'clock. I'll probably do some stuff over the weekend, but Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock p.m., we're doing live streaming. So you can watch it from Help Me Pass the Real Estate Exam or my YouTube channel, Facebook page, or over on X. Hey, as always, go out and make it a great day. Thank you for listening to the podcast for Global Real Estate School. I'm John Mayfield, the Real Estate Tech Guy. Go out and make it a great day.